society owing to the recent developments and polarization mentioned in the introduction to the previous panel. But to me, as a casual observer, it seemed there could be perhaps no polarization in something called green transformation, which gets about 12,500,000 hits in Google. But is it really so if the word greenwashing gets no fewer than 39.6 million, which is 3 times the score for green transformation? The panel was, let me quote, given the task to explore the socio-economic implications of energy accessibility and the transition from fossil fuel industries to green jobs. With that in mind, let me remind you that we look at the green transformation from the country boasting Europe's largest green power plant unit, providing 600,000 homesteads with green power, as this 225 megawatts unit is fueled solely with biomass, also called green fuel. 80% of it is wood chips, 20% of it is agricultural biomass. The wood chips mean 1.1 million tons a year, which is about 20 hectares of forest a day. And the biomass comes here from such distances as Central Africa. I'm talking about, for example, coconut husks. So I'm awfully sorry if that aside on the transition to what we call green has made the lives of the whole panel a bit harder, but the distinguished experts in panel 5 will definitely cope with that and many other problems and issues. Let me introduce the whole panel. We'll have the introduction from Diana Ürge Vorsatz, Central European University, and also member of the panel. We have its chair, Mr. Wojciech Jakóbik, Ośrodek Bezpieczeństwa Energetycznego, and also Energy Drink podcast. The other panelists are Siebern-Thomas, DG Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion, of course the European Union, Reena Badiani-Magnusson, World Bank, and Jakub Sokołowski, University of Warsaw, but also Institute for Structural Research. Europe and Mobilities, Challenges and Opportunities for Socio-Economic Transformation. The floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation, dear excellencies and distinguished colleagues and panel members. So yes, let's talk a little bit about the challenges and opportunities for the energy transition in Europe. And first of all, the good news is that, do I forward? I guess this way. The good news is that at the end of the day, we are actually doing quite well because we are, we know how to get to net zero emissions. And we have been really achieving amazing progress. This figure is from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the 6th assessment report, and shows how the market costs of renewable forms of electricity have decreased dramatically over the past couple of decades, so much that many of the renewable electricity generation options are not only competitive with fossil fuels, but actually the cheapest form of electricity in the vast majority of the countries around the world. And we look at the corresponding results, we also see that as a result, of course, the market uptake has also been very dynamic. In fact, it has been more dynamic than we would ever have even dreamed about. This, what you see, this is the market uptake of solar energy, and this is the forecast year after year of the key energy think tank of the world, the International Energy Agency. Year after year after year, they underestimated the market uptake of solar energy, and we are still often underestimating. So, we see the result. Last year, already in the first half year, wind and solar, just these two forms of energy, had a higher share in European electricity production than all fossil fuels. And in fact, while wind and solar, the share increased by increased substantially, fossil fuels dropped, the share of fossil fuels shared 17% in 1 year, while the solar and wind increased by 30%. So yeah, there is a lot of great story. So if it's so easy and so nice, then maybe we can just all go home and not need to discuss, right? Well, unfortunately, it's not that easy. Because in fact, even if I want to be very provocative, even the very notion of real energy transition can be questioned. Are we really transitioning? Yes, we are. If we look at the word picture, we are adding a lot of green, you know, a lot of really fantastic solar and wind and other renewables. But in fact, it all seems to come only on the top of the previous fuels. And in fact, most energy transitions in the past were in fact only just adding new types of energy generation to satisfy further energy demand, the increasing energy demand. And yes, that's exactly the problem. So what you see here is the green line is how the word annual growth in renewable electricity generation, which is really outpacing all of our expectations. Nevertheless, our expectations to grow more and hunger for more energy is even bigger than our amazing success in upscaling renewable energy. So, but that shows that there are two parts of the equation, and we always only thinking about one. Let's throw more supply, more green supply, more green supply. But that doesn't seem to be enough. We also have to think about the other side, keeping the demand perhaps even if not lower, but at least focusing how we can do more from less. And fortunately, if we do look at the EU, actually we are doing that. Even though still the green transition is just a little bit on its way, but it's already outpacing at least coal, so the new green electricity outpaces coal, but natural gas has increased. But the point is that we have managed to actually decrease total EU electricity consumption already for quite a number of decades consistently, while increasing our GDP and even population substantially. So that means, yes, we have shown that we can do more from less, and we could continue that further, but you do have to focus also on the demand side. And if you look at also the Polish picture, you have grown your economy tremendously. You are celebrated as one of the great success stories. And still, you haven't increased your electricity consumption substantially. Yes, a little bit, but not that substantially. And the new green power did manage to replace some of the coal. So anyway, the point is that the message is mixed and there are good signals. But these trends are not sufficient to bring us where we need to be. To prevent, for example, it's very nice to experience this warm day today, but I was quite surprised that just in the very start of June, I was actually really hot in the morning just walking in such a northern city as Warsaw. So the point is that we do need to focus also on the demand side. That's the only way how we can achieve the energy transition, the real energy transition, and succeed with the energy transition, not only throwing in more and more and more green supply, but we need to focus on the demand side as well. And what I want to argue also is that it's actually going to be also much better for everyone if we focus on that. But that will be towards after I present you my hypothesis. Oh, I don't know why the top is but anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is that, again, if I would ask you, you know, how European energy looks like, almost all of you, I'm sure, could roughly tell me how much, you know, oil and gas, what is the share and everything. But nobody has any clue, not even my colleagues who work in energy, that actually, if you look at how energy is being used, half of all European energy is actually used for heating and cooling. Half. We never talk about that. We only talk about coal and gas and oil. We never talk about it, how, for what we use it. The reason why it's really important is because that's where the enormous potential is for decreasing. Because it's one way to say, okay, we must get out of something. But maybe it's better to get out of it before first we actually provide the alternative, provide something where we won't even need that thing anymore that we want to prohibit, what we want to get out of. And what the point is that in the whole European Union, in the end, 27% of all of our final energy goes for space heating. We virtually don't need those molecules. Let me show you. And most of that is natural gas and coal and so on and so on. And if we actually look at the share, this is also not showing, but the share of different end uses in energy in residential buildings, we see that Poland is leading almost the whole EU in terms of the highest share of space heating in residential energy use. What that means is that probably the highest share of energy-related costs in space heating. And that's basically can get rid of almost all of that. How? Well, it's very simple, just good architecture. And this is no rocket science. This is the house of a dear colleague, or most of my, let's say, scientific icon of mine, Amory Lovins, already many years ago, I think 2 decades ago, this is his house. But that time it was his 74th banana crop. And the house is not in Kenya. It's in the Rocky Mountains at 2,000 meters elevation, and he has no heating system. And he built this in the 1970s because it was the oil crisis, and he was thinking, he's a physicist, why on earth are we importing all these molecules of hydrocarbons from this far away and creating all these political problems when we don't need it? If all the heat that we need is already in the house. You are all heat sources. This is all heat source. So if we just keep this inside the building, we don't need to bring and burn all these molecules. So he basically did the first passive house, and he said, because it was just cheaper to build it that way, because you don't need a heating system, so you save a lot of money. And it's a very livable house, still working. So that was the first passive house. But then Europe has actually advanced that concept into a patent, a very successful patent. This is one of the buildings of houses of one of my architect friends, now I can say that way. Snow outside, no heating inside because he doesn't need, it's a very comfortable temperature inside. So yes, and the passive house concept has been flourishing. There are many nice examples also in Poland. These are just some that and also timber construction, meaning, taking up, replacing cement and other emissions, and actually zero energy buildings, because you saw also the solar energy. But we see it in schools and industrial facilities as well. So all kinds of buildings can be built and can be retrofitted to that. There is also in social housing in Hungary, from social budgets, when a municipality receives a limited budget, that you have now some money to build social housing. From the same budget, you can easily do a passive house. There is no extra cost, but it really benefits the residents. Because they will have very little or almost no heating bills. These have been around, and these residents have virtually diminished or virtually disappeared heating bills. We can also do it in retrofit. It is Hungary. We had shown the word that is typical panel building that is all around in our region. You can reduce heating energy by 85%, and with no rocket science, just with getting rid of thermal bridges and good installation and heat recovery ventilation. So again, reducing energy substantially. Why is this especially important for mobility? Why is it especially important for the poor? And this is unfortunately the UK. But what it shows, look at the bottom, the blue bars. What it shows, if you look at household income deciles, heating is almost the same. Almost all households at all income levels actually roughly use the same amount of energy to heat their homes. But it hurts the poorest the most, because that means they spend a very significant amount of their income on heating. For the rich, it doesn't really hurt them because it's a fairly small share of their income. So that any amount of retrofit program really benefits the poorer, because for them, it's a major savings of their disposable income. So, but of course, it costs a lot. And my point is that I don't think we can expect the residents to take up these investments, because it does pay back, but the payback times are maybe 20 to 30 years. Most, flat owners or little, rural house owners, or most of the poorer parts of the society do not have that kind of capital to do a deep retrofit. But it's a societal interest. So we do need public money into fixing the building stock. But we will be all better off if we fix the building stock towards not needing all that enormous, the half basically, or 27% of our final energy. But just remind you, quite a lot of fossil fuel subsidies are still spent in Europe. Fortunately, Poland is not in a leading place here. But still, there are fossil fuel subsidies, but there are many other, or I believe actually really much more climate funds and climate money should go into retrofits, since there is almost no other area in the climate mitigation where you can save so much energy and so much emissions and provide so much benefit for the entire society. And from among those, because I think it will be better if we discuss it in the discussion itself. So I just want to highlight one of the benefits for beyond, of course, the social welfare, because I have argued that for decreasing energy poverty, this is the main thing that we need to do, because we want to get rid of energy poverty for the good. Because yes, it is also good to compensate for energy costs, but that, or even worse, is just to keep energy prices low. Because if you keep energy prices low, you disincentivize, I always have a trouble with this word, you disincentivize efficiency. So that means you actually lock people into energy poverty. That's what we have been doing in socialism, and we still suffer from the legacy of locked-in energy poverty. However, if we fix the buildings, we will get rid of energy poverty for long. So that's that's the most important benefit. But the other important benefit is for energy security. If we go along this path of just retrofitting our building sector to in a deep way, meaning to passive house standards, then we can basically get rid of most of our natural gas imports by the middle of the century. Yes, it takes time, but it's time to start, because we know already for decades that this is the strategy which will get rid of energy poverty, which will get rid of our energy dependence, so increase energy security, which will improve social welfare, which will create a lot of jobs, by the way, because you can only retrofit buildings locally. You cannot, outsource those jobs to Asia or anywhere, because you have to put these up where these buildings are. So just a whole range of co-benefits, and this solves many of our problems in the long term. So in conclusion, yes, it is important to focus beyond just thinking about, always prohibiting something. And I think that's exactly why there is a lot of backlash around the Green Deal and everything, because it was always only about prohibiting stuff. No, instead we want to provide incentives for the alternative, for a better economy, for a more competitive economy, a different economy, but a more competitive economy, for more social welfare. So but that you can do much better if you focus also on if you create the alternatives in energy demand, and you just won't need all of that coal and oil and so on. So focus also on energy demand beyond energy supply in the energy transition is crucial to succeed with the energy transition. I also showed you that heating and cooling accounts for half of European Union's final energy use, especially even higher in our countries, in the former communist countries, because of our communist legacy of cheap energy prices and disincentivizing efficiency. And much of this can be eliminated through just good architecture, deep retrofits, and energy positive buildings. On the new, they don't cost any more than standard buildings. On the retrofits, they fully pay back. But because they do require substantial amounts of investment, it cannot be expected that the average homeowner and the average person pays for this. We do need substantial help with that and subsidies for that. But I also showed that low energy or energy positive buildings benefit the poor disproportionately. So definitely very strongly helps with the just transition. I have a fantastic Polish master student who created this amazing thesis, which I didn't want to show the results yet because she's defending it next week. So, but showing how energy, more prosumers and more self-sufficient buildings, how they help Polish energy transition. And also lowering heating costs to a fraction of what they are today can turn cost of living crisis around actually to really help people substantially with their social welfare. And finally, I've shown that EU's natural gas import dependency almost vanishes by mid-century in a deep retrofit scenario. And finally, just a personal point, because I have 1 minute left, but it's going to be less. I'm really grateful for the organizers that they did allow me not to fly, but take the night train. I know it was hard because it is more expensive, and I was actually the most shocked when in the end I saw the ticket. But in the end, the reason how we calculate it is that, yes, by 2 nights, it's going to be avoiding 2 nights of hotel and for airport transfer, even financially, maybe it's okay. But the reason I'm showing this picture, it was very sad when I got off the train this morning. I realized I was the only one. And that's how sad it is. There is 1 night train between Vienna and Poland. There are how many flights? So we are doing something very wrong. We are still strongly at the end subsidizing flying, which is mostly for a small segment of society, whereas we are really, so the pricing is really wrong. I'm just saying this because I hope there are some decision makers, even if it's not fully pertaining to this topic, but I hope that it's going to help change something. We need to fix the pricing for this. It was comfortable, it was clean, it was punctual, everything, but why was there nobody else there? Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you for this interesting presentation and this positive agenda that is really necessary to speak frankly about energy transition. That's what are we going to do to merge the policies, to merge the energy policy and the employment policy, the ways those policies are intertwined between each other. So this idea of decreasing reliance of imported natural gas is close to my heart, because we are in Poland. This conference is supported by Polish presidency, as there is a full support from Polish presidency for the REPowerEU program, which is all about quitting reliance on the main supplier, which we all know. But going further with our discussion, we have wonderful panelists that were announced, and we have different approaches to green transformation when it comes to the policy, the employment policy. So maybe for a beginning, what's your remarks on the presentation? What would be the one thing to remember when we assess those ideas? Who'd like to comment on that?
Let me go ahead. I'm going to remember a lot from this presentation. I think it's great when you have such dynamic speaker, thank you, but who also inspires us in many ways. I'm going to remember that train because I think we've all been in that experience. We've all faced that decision point. I know I can a number of times. For me, it wasn't the price point that was putting off for the train, but it was actually availability. So I can tell you that there are 3 trains a week between Brussels, where I live, and Vienna, the night trains, and they're always fully booked months in advance. And the question you always ask is, where is the infrastructure here when the demand is obviously so high? But I want to reflect on this, and I'll come back to it in my comments also on energy poverty, on your point on the energy efficiency, especially in heating and cooling. You know, there's a reason why this is called the first fuel. it's very clear that we have the technologies already at hand. It's not about future technologies. It's not about ambitious designs and storage. It's literally about what is currently available. And yet there are so many clear gaps. Some of them are financial, but many of them are simply, they can be behavioral, they can be status. You're focused on what you have now. You don't want to move to new approaches. But others are simply also that our regulations and our prices aren't pushing us there, which is what you mentioned in terms of fossil fuel subsidies. So when you put all this together, it means really obvious solutions simply don't move. And right now we seem to be taking partial solutions. So I really loved all of your slides. I'm going to steal some of your photos. And that was one of the reflections that I had, that some of these things that seem so easy are actually incredibly hard. Thanks.
Thank you. Frank, did you try this train?
I didn't take this train, I have to
Yet.
admit. I do take it, I have taken it from Brussels to Berlin, but I should have taken it. I did pay a compensation. I took a green ticket from Brussels Airlines, I have to admit, but I should. I fully share this view, and while I cannot announce that on pricing, I don't know what the strategies exactly are, but there are activities going on to ease and facilitate and increase the number of offers of cross-country trains, and also make ticketing easier. And I fully share and the view, and agree with most of what you said. Maybe as a first reaction, I'm working with the Director General for Employment, Social Affairs in the European Commission. So I'm not an energy expert, but we do work on aspects of just transition. And probably there's a chance later to say something on the employment side, on the social side. I also work on research programming. We'll discuss this later. But the things which struck me or which came to my mind is we need to empower the people along the way in this transition, and we need to find the means, have a transparent exchange of what the real costs and benefits are for everyone, compensate those who are in need. We can say a bit what our ideas are there, and also empower people along the way. We have done a Eurobarometer survey a few years ago on the perceptions of fairness in the green transition. What we found then, it was at the height of the energy price crisis. Maybe it has worsened a bit. Most people are supportive at that time of the transition. And even want to be part of it, but are not sure that they can be part of it, because whether they have the right skills, and even more so whether they can afford it, or whether they will reach this target by 2050. And if there are these concerns and people feel they are unaddressed, I think then we have a problem. So there we need openness, and I think we can probably discuss how we try to do this. And similarly, I would agree on the need to also include the demand side. Yes, there has been a lot of progress in decoupling, also in rolling out renewable energies much faster than we had thought, probably in difficult times. But for example, the European Commission, when it has proposed a communication on the next 2040 climate target, the intermediate target, which has to be integrated in the European climate law, there was also a section clarifying that without behavioral changes, without some call it sustainable lifestyles or others, it will be very difficult to reach our targets. But this must not be seen as imposing on people something they don't want, but on the contrary, of trying to find out how this can be done. And maybe this brings me back a bit to the last session, and with this, thank to the organizers for this excellent conference and the, let's say, courageous approach you take to all the sessions. I was also at the previous session on democratic backsliding, and there are links between these topics. And the one link which comes to mind, which also came to mind here now, is to create awareness about the real opportunities and to fight misinformation and fake news. And this is even something which is literally said in the mission letter of one of the European commissioners, Commissioner Hoekstra, in charge of climate action, who has also to do this, because people are not against change per se. They are not against having a better life or paying less in the end, but they need to be informed and need to be empowered to do that, and they need support in this transition.
Yeah, so I'd like to give you a supplementary question about those challenges when it comes to the most affected parts of our economy when it comes to energy transition. How would you address that?
Yes, so at the European level, as you know, the European Green Deal comes together with the commitment not to leave anyone behind, and that it covers a lot. This covers a lot, not to have to leave anyone behind in the transition out of, let's say, high emission sectors or high energy intensive sectors, and high energy prices are an issue for those sectors and for competitiveness. So we have to also to support companies in this context. But obviously some people, we know that some people will lose their jobs. More people will see their tasks changing on their jobs, in their companies, in their value chains. And there are many new sectors where there are new opportunities coming up. Circular economy, electricity production is one of those, energy production in general. And we need to grasp these opportunities. So one thing to help those affected is through policies here, and first by analyzing how are people affected, and what are say the employment opportunities in alternative sectors. So this is something we are doing. We're doing in the Commission together with the researchers and in many other fields. And the numbers we find is that there is scope to create additional jobs, new jobs, but only if the right policies are in place, employment policies which help people find these jobs, requalify them, reskill them, provide them with the right necessary skills needed in these new sectors. And at the same time, we are also facing labor and skill shortages, also a country like Poland. So we need to make sure that we have the people to do these works, to install these, retrofit these buildings, install solar power plants, build wind parks offshore, etc., and maintain them, etc., etc. And that's something which is not easy to be done. And there are also funding tools in place to do that. The Just Transition Fund, helping regions phasing out in coal in particular. So several Polish regions, including Silesia and others, are affected here and do receive a lot of funding to help the regions diversify their economies and create new jobs on the spot. Another thing I have to mention here, how to help the affected, maybe we come back in the second round if I'm too long here, is to address regressive effects of climate measures on households, be it for heating and cooling, be it for transport, and there are tools in the making. So
we'll go deeper into that.
Both strands in parallel, empowering them to take up the employment opportunities and help them in the transition, but also help them in the transition at home, in the way they move, they live, and compensate those who can't afford, let's say, the transition beginning. And I will be happy to say how to do that.
We'll get back to this topic, but maybe a few more words about the presentation from Jakub.
So what I would pick up from this presentation and from what Frank was mentioning as well is the energy security narrative. We, especially in the Central Eastern European countries, we need to focus on this narrative to build support for transition. We have seen that with the Russian invasion to Ukraine. We have seen that right now when the Green Deal or ETS becomes a word that is, let's say, a suicide for any politician that tries to pick up and create ambitious climate policies. So maybe this focus works somewhere else, and we have to acknowledge that, but maybe in the context of bordering countries with Russia, countries that are very dependent or used to be very dependent from Russia, we have to convince people that transition is also about energy security, is also about independence. Of course, we want to show also that it's about cost of living and a possibility to lower this cost. But I think that, and we also have research to confirm that actually when you look at people that are more right-wing or left-wing oriented, energy security narrative is the one thing that actually connects them, unifies them in terms of preferences for energy transition and change. So this is how we can work on this topic. Thank you.
Good point. Really good point. I could add a small portion to that. Looking at the trenches in Ukraine, there is also an energy transition going. The Ukrainian soldiers are not only using the diesel generators, but also investing in batteries, in renewables that are heavily dispersed and more secure from the military point of view. So it's a really great point to be added to our discussion. But coming back to Diana and your presentation, I believe it dropped well. It went really well. I would add one thing, that we are having a fresh train from Warsaw to Rijeka, and from Rijeka it's really close to Adriatic Sea. So everyone, there is also a positive agenda when it comes to Polish trains. We can use it. But coming back to your topic and the support that we need to gather to have this energy transition going, how to show the benefits of energy transition not only in the housing, but also in general energy transition of our European economy for the people to support it, no matter are they right-wing supporters or left-wing, they all want to have cheap and clean heating and energy sources. So what's your take on that?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the wonderful comments. So just before I answer your question, just very quickly, let me reflect on just one of a few points. I think thank you very much for talking about making ticketing easier across Europe. I think perhaps this is one of the key, because it's no problem to go to any website and book any flight to all over the world, and immediately you don't have this for trains. This is ridiculous. You have to, if you cross countries anyway. So I think this is just, we are so behind, and I don't understand. That's not even a financial issue, right? To have just agreement among train companies that if one country's train is late, then you don't lose the ticket to the next one, and so on. So it's a lot just effort rather than money. Right. I think I agree with everything else. For Brussels, check out the trains now. They are now empty because they raised the prices. They doubled the prices in the last year, and that's why also this train was, before it was not impossible to book, but now it's so expensive that it's I think it's also problematic. But coming back very much to the question, I'm sorry, I will have to come back to still how on the demand side, because how to make the energy transition attractive to people is to make it all sexy. If we have better cities where you don't have to rely on cars, but you can have really good access to everything that you need on a daily basis, that then you don't control your transport costs or by having subsidized fuels or something, but simply because you don't need to get around. And we don't necessarily enjoy spending all that energy. So the point is not to have cheap energy, but to have low energy costs, low mobility costs. And that we can do the best we can do it by eliminating the need for it. And I just want to remind ourselves that the most livable, I'm sure you're also looking at the livable cities rankings, right? The most livable cities in Europe and in the whole world actually are those which are not built for cars, but where there is highest share of walking, active transport, bicycle use, and great public transport. So and which are almost, and as a result, they are kind of 15-minute cities because you don't need to get. And equally also for buildings, it's not, you can have you can have huge energy prices if you don't need the heating. It doesn't matter. The heating is still affordable because you virtually don't need heating. And it was so funny. I was at this conference in Ireland for passive houses, and they took us to a tour. They have now enormous, Ireland is booming. The economy is booming similar like to Poland. So they have to build a lot of new buildings. And so they took us to this big, huge passive house development. And so yes. Okay. So why do you need these heaters there? Because you actually don't. Yes. Physically we don't need the heaters because we don't need any heating in the buildings in the end. But the reason we have to put them is psychological, because people feel cold if they don't see the heater there. So it was so funny. So that's the reason. It was very small. It was like this little heater in the entire. But anyway, so the point is that I think the way we can show the attractiveness, if you don't have an energy bill, if you don't need to don't have to be stuck in traffic for 2 hours a day, and you still lead a comfortable, good life, high quality life. I think this is the way to be best, rather than, yes, energy supply and making energy prices affordable, true, but I think the best is to make energy costs affordable, which is the energy demand times the price. Thank you.
Yeah, it's all about psychology, because I'm coming from Kraków, which is historically one of the places in Poland with most polluted air. But still, when there was this idea from municipal authorities to introduce the clean areas inside the city, the people were against, because they were afraid not to get to work using a car and so on, in spite of the fact we have a wonderful public transport in Kraków. So it might be about fears. So maybe some education, some good informative policy, not a propaganda, but also some numbers to show to the people. What do you think?
Absolutely. But I think it's really a challenge for us now if we see, the results of all kinds of elections around. I think the narrative that, and I'm not saying that's what you said, but just general that we know and people are stupid and we have to educate them. Maybe it's not the right approach, but we still have to give this message. But maybe
To
we
show
just,
them the information,
absolutely.
not to
yes, no, I
make
didn't.
them
I wasn't
study, but
criticizing. I was criticizing ourselves. I'm a
Yeah.
university teacher when we had this attitude. But I think we have to be exactly more creative in what you're saying. Maybe through social media, Misama. So give them exactly the message, or just I think. Best examples work a lot. If many of us are doing this and keep posting about this and whatever, or influencers, I think that can make more impact.
Yeah, you can just show the numbers. That's the approach that is ruling the debate right now. Frank, what do you think? I see you want to say something.
Yes, with pleasure. Probably three short points. The first one, it was clear, very implicit in your presentation. We know that transition brings costs, and that's what people sort of are rightly afraid of or need to address. Yet we also know that, as we say, inaction or delaying action is also has also attached a lot of costs and will hit the most vulnerable most. We often are in the wrong comparison of comparing action and costs with non-action, which would be costless. That's not the case. And I think there we should be honest. Climate change is real. All member states in the EU are preparing climate adaptation plans. How do we deal with climate change if temperature rise goes beyond what we are hoping for? And some member states have drafted the first plans, which are based on a 4-degree scenario. So this means real impact on everyone's life and everyday's work, which comes at a cost as well. The second point I would like to say, sharing best practice is key. So I don't go into much detail, but we work in the European Commission among member states with the Labour and Social Affairs Ministries, Energy and others, to do exactly that, to monitor what do you do, also in terms of employment policies, skill policies, social protection policies, access to essential services like energy, and how do you involve the local population, stakeholders, social partners in this process. And every 2 years we have a process which we call peer review, where member states present what they have done and others question them, criticize them, and we have joint conclusions. We'll have the next round in 2 weeks' time. So a country like Poland will be invited also to say, what have you done? What's in your National Energy and Climate Plan, which is not yet submitted, the final version, or what is in other policy documents. And I think this is very important. All member states take action. All member states are willing to take action and have different constraints, but all are interested to exchange best practice and to hear from each other what works in your case and why has it worked, and to emulate this. And the third point I would like to make is on I agree on the horizon. Yes, it's important that we go, the aim of the transition is to have cheaper energy resources, renewable energy resources at the end of the process. But we are discussing this, and I come back to the previous session, which really was impactful, also in a context on a climate of, let's say, difficult decision-making in many member states, of lacking, signs of lack of people's trust in policy making. So we have really to address the focus on this transition, help people throughout this transition, because their concerns are real. Energy poverty, so this is the number of people or households in the European Union who cannot afford to heat their homes properly. This number has gone up to 47 million people in the energy price crisis, despite massive public support programs to cushion the price effects. So 12 million more people have been affected. This has gone down since, but this is something we have to take into account. People don't disentangle necessarily the effects of the different geopolitical, energy, climate policy-related impacts, and we need to find convincing answers to this and to reassure them that this goes in the right direction, and that we will help them on this transition while energy costs are still high. Also, this takes place in the context of a housing crisis for many, or a cost of living challenges, which people have to address. And last but not least, as we said, also we have seen some decline. Overall, the employment situation in labor markets are quite resilient, have been resilient throughout the crisis, but we have seen some declining employment in high emission, high energy intensive industries. So we have to take this context and these concerns into account and combine both messages. There's this cheaper, better solutions in the future, but we also help you to support actual investments on the ground. And this is maybe to mention it here, the Commission has proposed as part of its Fit for 55 package, an energy policy package, social climate fund, you know of probably, which was related to a new emissions trading scheme, controversial, I know, to be introduced as of 2027. And this would increase the price because include in the emission trading scheme housing and transport, road transport, the two things everyone uses. Everyone has related expenditure, and that's why people want to know what the solutions are. The Commission or the EU has decided to put up a fund to deal with this. It's called Social Climate Fund. It will be operational as of next year, and it's quite innovative. It's innovative in the sense that we take 25 to 50% with member state contributions of the revenues from this new emissions trading scheme to pay it back to vulnerable households, to help them cope with higher energy costs for housing and higher energy costs for transport. And this fund is innovative because it kicks in 1 year before the new emissions trading scheme kicks in. Currently, member states have to draft their national plans to identify who are vulnerable groups at national level, who should be eligible for these funds, which type of households, people related to social housing, people with living in rural areas and having high transport costs, for example, people at risk of poverty. These are groups affected in Poland, we see, for energy costs, people at risk of poverty, for housing, for transport, people in rural areas mainly. And we need to adapt the solutions. And the member states and themselves, with the local stakeholders, civil society, social partners, should come up with lists of measures they propose to the Commission and how to use the funding. Poland will be one of the main beneficiaries of this fund. And once the plan is submitted, the Commission will assess it and the fund plan will be agreed and payments will be made upon achieving certain milestones and targets. So important just to say here, yes, an incentive structure is put in place, which makes those pay who can afford to pay, but which helps those most vulnerable who cannot afford to pay. And so to reach at the same time social objectives and climate objectives, hopefully.
So are those talks hard? Because we hear from Poland that they want to delay ETS2 for 2027 at least. So we don't see, a compromise, but well, they are saying no, essentially.
Yes, I think negotiations are difficult. At the same time, I'm not mandated to say, I don't know, I'm not part of the ETS negotiations, obviously. But I think the important point just is to say the construction goes together. When the Commission put up the Fit for 55 package, which is a package of more than 20 measures to help Europe reach its climate reduction target by 2030, to have 55% less emissions by 2030. It's a mix of measures. It's not only a measure of price signals. It's also a measure of energy efficiency and of many other tools, because we think price signals alone is too harsh, given their regressive nature. But at the same time, I think all economists agree without price signals, it will also not function to make this transition. Hence, this solution. The only thing which one can say at this stage is, for the time being, that obviously there cannot be a refunding mechanism or a social climate fund or plan without an ETS in place. And this is, I think,
yeah. So we are looking for this compromise, and that brings us to Reena Badiani-Magnusson and the remarks on energy poverty, the fight with energy poverty, and on the other hand, the just energy transition ideas. What's your take from the perspective of World Bank, so from the world perspective?
Okay, so there's already been a lot said on energy poverty, on the various ways in which we have to think about not just I think the point of unpacking costs is really important. You have to think about how to reduce demand as well as working on the price side. But I have 3 points. One, I hear a lot of discussion on just transition, and the emphasis is quite often on the just. And I think it's really important to say that the just is a transition quality. It's where we need to ensure that we go with the energy transition to make sure that the vulnerable groups aren't left behind, to make sure that we have societal support. But the goal is energy transition. And the just element is a transition quality. So we have to figure out how to manage that. And this transition, I think we have to also put it in the context of the other transitions we've talked about during this conference. So yesterday we talked about the demographic transition. I think the next session is going to talk about technology transitions. These transitions are all changing the workplace, they're changing the way people live their lives, and we have to think about the just energy transition amongst those, because or the energy transition amongst those. It's the most complex in the sense that you're shifting not just systems, but also demands, and you're also shifting from the people's perspective. You're going to be touching upon multiple elements of their lives, whether jobs, through prices, through their direct combustion, through the way that their houses are effectively heated. So the energy transition is incredibly complex, and so we can't just put it in the bucket of as part of multiple transitions. It has to be seen as different. And it's clear that poorer households have less room for maneuver for all of the reasons discussed in this panel. There's an energy efficiency tax. You know, when you live in an uninsulated house with leaky windows, when your radiator has to be full burning in order to get your heat up, you're going to pay more for your heating. And you're going to end up with higher emissions, as was shown. I did a study for Poland with that same chart from the UK. You can find it in our country climate development report, which shows exactly that same picture you see from the UK, that for the lowest income households, particularly single family buildings, you see that many of the emissions for poor households come through this energy efficiency tax. Their technology that they're using is effectively just much less efficient. They have to use more energy. It brings up their total costs. So they're basically spending, what they can't afford to do is get to the technologies they need. They're beyond their reach. So it's clear that we're going to have to support poorer households through the transition. We're going to have to support those workers that are laid off. But and this is where I'm getting to my point, sorry, but increasingly what I see is that poorer households, the just transition element, is used for a reason for delay. And this is often used as a reason for delay by groups that have effectively stalled in their own transitions, that can actually afford to make them, but haven't. And we can say that the price signals aren't correct, but you can also say that the incentives are not aligned, and we have to find a way of actually signaling, okay, look, this is a societal shift. Those that can afford to do it need to get on the train, and we're going to throw all our instruments at you to get on that train, and we're going to be supporting those that are left behind. But focusing on the just, focusing on the poorer groups, and using this as a rationale for stalling, it's something that, as someone who works on inclusion for nearly 15 years, I've never seen poverty discussed so much as in this transition. It's amazing. So many different discussions. Poverty is sort of a side issue left in social policy. Here it's a central issue. And I think we need to work out how to manage the transition to make it just, but to ensure that we're on the train. Second, so the question is how you do that. And I've seen across countries in Europe, and I hope that the Social Climate Fund will look directly at this, look at mechanisms. There are two pathways taken to handle energy poverty. And the countries that get greater societal support, that manage to get their populations on board and help support them, are those that use both pathways, not just one or the other. In a bunch of countries, quite often Central and Eastern European, you have energy policy and environment policy dominating, and so you have these massive renovation wave programs, you have heating support, you have energy support measures. And on another side of the program, you have social policy, where you have integrated approaches in social assistance to think about heating as one of the components of social support. But when you use one or the other measure, you don't quite get there, because the energy policy branch often deals with the technology transition, but it doesn't fully deal with the fact that these households have larger baskets that are needed for energy. So you need to put both the social and the energy policy together in order to make this work. And it's not being done in Poland. Your social assistance structures are not directly supporting, your social assistance programs are not calibrated to support those who are going through the renovation wage transition in the Clean Air Priority Program. So poorer households who shift from coal, biomass and trash towards gas, for example, are not being picked up in the social assistance system. The social assistance system now goes to only 2%. The minimum income programs go to 2% of the population. Heating is really a very small share of the support. So basically, you've got a disconnect between your policies. And when you have that disconnect, you're basically not moving. So you need to bring those together in order for it to work. And finally, I just want to pick up on this point of like effectively looking holistically at the barriers that are facing households. And information alone will get us nowhere. You have to unpack that journey of going from current lifestyles to future lifestyles and understand where are your inflection points, what's holding you back. Sometimes it's fear. It's simply fear. I've got very little money. I really can't afford any extra expenses. I know you tell me that this will make me better off, but you know, what happens if it doesn't? The social policy doesn't help right now. I have no, you know, even if I'm a social assistance beneficiary, I can't get any more money. I'll be stuck. So that's a rational fear. And even if you will strengthen your policy, there'll still be those people. But the reality also is that there are some houses that are going to be really difficult to invest in. There are going to be some groups that are going to find it hard to get to work. And we need to unpack this entirely. I'm not surprised by the Ireland example of having a heater in a passive house. I can tell you that as a Brit, growing up in an energy inefficient house, my idea of a warm house was when a radiator was sort of blasting heat. I touched the radiator, it'd be boiling hot. I'm like, yeah, my house is good for the winter. When I moved to Sweden, my radiator was really cold. And I remember turning to my husband and saying, look, we're going to be in such trouble in 3 months' time. There are mental shifts that need to happen as you move on this transition, as well as behavioral, and we need to support households through this process. So in summary, look, we can't focus just on energy poverty as a reason to stop. We need to think about it through the systems perspective, through social and energy policy, through behavioral transitions that need to happen. We have to unpack the causes of why people aren't moving. But also, we have to think about it with these other transitions, because when you look for system-level solutions, you find that actually the problems aren't always where you think they are. So, you know, I can see Poland, for example, right now is really struggling from the fact that the confidence in renovation wave programs is plummeting. Also because you can see that the building sector effectively hasn't got fully standards and accreditation frameworks that are needed for building trust and confidence in this rapidly shifting market. That's a sideways solution, but it's a system level solution. Thanks.
Thank you for this one. Jakub, I know your institute is carefully looking at data when it comes to those social connection with the energy policy. Is it really disconnected in Poland? Do you agree?
Yes, it's very disconnected. We also drafted the social climate plan for Poland that is going to be announced tomorrow by the ministry. What everybody in this panel is saying is completely right. So what we observed and what we modeled is the fact that even if you do investments that are, let's say, relatively ambitious and that are described in Polish Energy and Climate Action Plan, you are still going to see an increase of energy poverty due to the introduction of ETS2. What do you need to do? You need to tackle this with transfers. You need to have this kind of a social assistance that's going to work together. But it has to I think relates to the concept actually that was introduced yesterday by Heinde Haas of this involuntary mobility. We have people that are stuck. They want to move. They want to follow this transition, and it is about energy poor people who want to have better housing conditions, who doesn't want to use coal. They don't want this. This is the only option for them, but this is not their choice. So we need to help them. We need to make their lives secure, as Reena was mentioning. We have to give them investment opportunities, but we have to give them direct transfers as well, so they can afford, start thinking about changing their situation. And the same goes back for workers. We have 70,000 people working in coal mining. And again, this is involuntary mobility. They don't want to be digging coal pits until the end of their lives, but they see that they are confronted with this fear that also Reena was mentioning of losing their welfare, losing a stable job, using union support. Even if they go to wind farm, a wind farm is more, let's say, precarious work. There will be no unions helping them. So we need to cover for all those benefits. Actually, and maybe as a final point, we are stuck in this way of thinking of transition that we had learned in the 1990s. But Poland is not transitioning from centrally planned economy to market economy anymore. All the industries are booming. There is plenty of work. Our research shows that since 2026, there will be the demand for workers in Silesia alone will be higher than the supply of workers. We can, of course, try to think of how we can get well-skilled migrants to fill this gap. But we do have very well-skilled workers in place. They are working in coal industry that should be shrinking, that we should close down tomorrow and secure all the needs of the workers. So if I imagine a negotiation with coal miners that would start tomorrow, I would say, okay, what is your request? Do you want to have a salary that is comparable to your mining salary? Okay, go to another sector and we are going to top. The government will top the difference from public funds. You want to retire? I don't see this as a good solution because we still need those workers to feed in the local labor market. But it's still better for them to retire tomorrow than to retire in 2050, as they agreed with the Polish government. Keep digging the coal pits until nobody needs the coal, because we already also in our research showed that the demand for coal is shrinking. The supply of workers digging the coal is not following the same trend. So for what? They are just doing that because someone promised them that they can do it until 2050. It's not fair also to them. So even if they, and I support this completely, if they want to be important, there is plenty of room for them to be important, to give heat. We even can build this beautiful narrative that they can still bring energy and heat to Polish homes, but not in digging coal, but by retrofitting houses, by building wind farms, but by working in energy sector. But we need to accommodate their needs because their needs are right, and this is the just quality of transition. And we have the means to do it. With Social Climate Fund, we have the means to cover for the increasing energy bills and to signal that we want this transition to be the rich polluters need to pay. We can send this signal to the society because we have the means. We are a high-income country. We are all experiencing an economic boom, an economic miracle of Poland. So we have to use it, but we have to confront, and we have to be not to stay in defensive. That we stop using the word Green Deal, and this will help. No, people are smart. People will understand what is happening, even if we call it a different name. We have to accommodate their needs, and we fortunately can do that. But we have to be courageous and have this transition head on. And I completely support what Reena said, that energy poverty right now is being used as this kind of a excuse that we can't do anything. No, we have evidence. We have empirical evidence that we can do everything and accommodate the need also of vulnerable, that they are not going to be worse off. Thank you.
I believe we are all, we have even some people supporting this idea from the stage, but I believe we are all waiting for your paper to be published tomorrow, online, everywhere. Okay, so we'll read it carefully, but guys, how did you like those several ideas from Poland? Who'd like to Frank first, maybe?
Yes, maybe on the last two, also what Reena said, I couldn't agree more on this need to mainstream policies or to have a systemic or global approach to it. What does that mean? It means that you cannot use social policies or employment policies to fix problems afterwards. So we have to think them, and let's say, see them coming in the beginning, assess these challenges in the beginning, and build them into our policy making. Same with the compensation schemes where we put them up, and then the climate policies or the tools we put in place here, like the Social Climate Fund, can't deal with all social policy problems or all inequality problems, obviously, and they should not, because there are other tools in place. They may be sufficient or not. Maybe in that context, I should say that the European Commission is working on a number of initiatives. One of them is what's the first ever anti-poverty strategy at European level, which should come out at the beginning of next year, a new strategy to fight poverty at large. And obviously there are many other tools. The minimum wage directive can help, certain other policies are important here. And I think we should not play energy poverty against transport poverty, for example. In this context, one should not play people in, let's say, low, badly insulated homes in the city versus those who need their diesel car for some time to move in the rural countryside and so on. The transition has to cover all of these cases, and we have to think them together and make them part of the strategy in addition to the other strategies. And I also fully agree with the focus on job quality, which is needed, which is also something this new commission has put into its priorities. So just to throw the names around, you didn't mention it, Jakub, but so the commission has, since its beginning, put up what we call a clean industrial deal. So it should support and complement the Green Deal by helping industry. So to make this transition feasible for industry, let's put it that way, for supporting demand, also new technologies, clean tech, reskilling as well in this context. The Commission has adopted what we call a union of skills. So we want to make skilling easier, improve basic skills, digital skills, but also portability of skills across countries so that people can move more easily between countries if they wish to do so. It should not be an obligation to do so, but it should be an opportunity to do that, and recognition of qualifications should be easier, etc. So this is a whole package. These are seen as essential. And the third one, which is currently under development with the social partners, is key, and it's called a Quality Jobs Roadmap. And this is mentioned in the priorities of this Commission, a Quality Jobs Roadmap to ensure a just transition for all, ensuring fair wages, fair working conditions, and fair transitions. Now, it's very ambitious. But this will be the frame for further actions at European level, which could be thought of. And it's, as Jakub rightly said, it's a real issue. The OECD last year had an annual report, the Employment Outlook. It's one of their flagship reports. And it was very good. It focused on the job quality impacts of labor market transitions related to the green transition and climate change. And it did find exactly that. Yes, the green economy holds many good jobs, high-skilled jobs for people who have bring the necessary skills. But as Jakub rightly said, it also shows that some people with lower skills are moving out of high energy intensive sectors, lose out in job quality. This means they may lose salary, they may lose a right to access to collective bargaining, they may lose in terms of occupational health and safety. In the circular economy, you probably have to reinvent this sector, and new jobs in the circular economy are different from waste management today. So there are a lot of challenges, and I think this focus on job quality is key to get people along, so that and support may be needed to uphold quality in a transition context by retraining them. As I said, these are open processes, open consultations, also for the social climate plan at national level. There should be consultations following a partnership proposal, and also for developing these tools at European level. Ideas are sought, what impacts to look at. And I would finish with one last initiative. You mentioned what comes out tomorrow. I will mention what came out yesterday, which were the so-called country-specific recommendations in the context of the European semester. It's a bit bureaucratic jargon, but this is the process of coordinating economic, fiscal, social, and employment policies at European level. It's a process where the Commission and Member States together assess main challenges, and then the Commission issues a proposal for country-specific recommendations, which the Council, the Member States themselves, will adopt. And on that basis, Member States will respond. So for Poland, and not to be too long, but the assessment says that Poland, the implementation of policies and also funding programs has made progress in Poland. It's important to continue efforts to ensure the swift implementation of these programs and maximize the impact on the ground. Yet Poland continues to face challenges, including those related to accelerate the energy transition, as one mentioned, notably in the southwestern regions reliant on coal and heavy industries and in the industrial center, and to tackle skill shortages and mismatches in addition to high housing demand and also underrepresentation of certain groups, vulnerable groups in the labor market. And then it makes a couple of more specific recommendations, which also include how to balance the energy price, flexibilize energy grids, probably energy taxation and levies. So it's not all about the programs we have discussed here, and similarly for skilled programs. So this is something on which we're working together and together with the Polish government. But the energy transition is very central here, and also its socioeconomic impacts.
We don't have so much time to go so much deeper into this topic, but a few more remarks from Jakub about the lessons from energy transition in Poland, because we're in Poland, so we have some successes, of course, in our history, but also clearly visible challenges that were visible lately in political discussions. So we need to bring this topic up. What's your take on that?
I think I mentioned most of them in my previous talk, but what I want to emphasize is that we need to make the decisions early on and not to fear the consequences, because there is the cost of inaction that Frank was mentioning, and this cost is huge. And unfortunately, it will not be politicians who are going to pay this cost. This will be the ordinary people, workers, low-income, middle-class people that are going to pay the cost of inaction. Because if we keep deceiving them that everything can stay the same, they are going to pay this cost, and we still have opportunities. And Poland is one of the hardest cases for transformation. We have 90% of coal workers working in one region in Silesia. We have 90% of coal being consumed by Polish households in the whole European Union. So if we look at the example of Poland, we can learn that actually making those tough decisions and even trying to then tackle the consequences is better than inaction. Because what we have been observing, and again, there is research that confirms that we are dealing with this kind of huge air pollution issues. So we have, I don't know, 20 out of 30 most polluted cities in the world are located in Poland, exactly due to this inaction, exactly due to the fact that politicians used to treat households as a kind of end user that will benefit from transition. No, they need to be a part of this transition. It has to be solutions that are well suited to them. It has to be a good program that we have. We have cleaner program. This is one of the biggest retrofitting schemes in whole Europe. I think the third biggest one. What we have done, instead of trying to let it evolve, we lost this huge confidence, and this is the case that we should think about. We lost huge confidence that people had in this program, that when they are going to be involved, they are going to pay for the investment, they are going to be repaid from the program, because Polish government said, okay, there is something wrong with the program and we need to stop it. No, you have to let it evolve. You can't stop it even for a moment, because this trust will never be rebuilt, or will be rebuilt in number of years. How you are going to go to those workers and convince them that when they are going to be laid off in coal industry, you will repay them? How you are going to convince low-income, middle-income people that when ETS is coming to force, you will be able to support them with direct transfers? They will see it. They will see it on the bills. So you have to build this kind of a trust, and I think this is missing. And you can build this trust with funding. You have to pay for it, and education will not be sufficient. So it's not about only informing. You have to inform people about your right decisions, but you need to make those right decisions in the first place. So you need to have efficient social climate fund, efficient social assistance, efficient investment programs that you can inform about. And I think this is one of the, let's say, additional lessons from.
So one supplementary question: should this approach be pan-European, or every country should work on its own when it comes to such programs to be efficient?
I think it should be pan-European. Sometimes I heard it also in this conference, that Poland is a very unique country and it has a very Polish perspective. I don't think so. Especially in Central Eastern Europe countries, we are very much similar, also in terms of our housing stock. When it comes to the workers have the same needs everywhere. Vulnerable people have same needs everywhere. So I think about this quality feature that Reena was mentioning, we have to make this transition just, and we can do it if we tackle inequalities, if we tackle inequalities before they appear, and we can do it. Of course, we can do it by raising income taxes, but are we ready to have this debate in Poland or any other country with, let's say, more liberal government? I don't think so. So if we don't want to start this debate, we can use transition as one of the means to tackle inequalities as well.
Okay, so Diana and then Frank commenting.
Thank you very much. So lots of things have accumulated. So let me reflect on a couple of things. I fully agree with almost everything that Jakub just said. But I think some points is where I think Europe can be a bit more bold and a bit more brave. Of course, it's easy for me as an academic to say that, but let me still posit. For example, the issue of competitiveness. Because yes, it's important for us to compensate the losers, but we should also really think, is that what type of economy, not all industries, but what kind of economy do we want, which we will become competitive? Do we really need all those energy intensive industries? Is it really good for us to keep, conserving 20th century industries in their old form? Because in the end, if we really focus very much on and of course I'm provocative, so don't take it please absolutely straight, and I know that but I'm more talking to the people here and my husband who is member of the business sector. So we have this debate usually, but do we really need to conserve everything, in a 20th century form? Because in the end, if we were always very carefully preserving the competitiveness of all industries, we would be still riding in horse-ridden carriages, right? Because the sailboat industry and the carriage industry should not lose competitiveness, right? So it's also, do we really need so much? I do have a few more points because I have not been able to reflect, sorry, for a while. Do we really need so much cement anymore? I'm not sure. Yes, there is some housing boom and we need some more housing at the same time. Why? Our population is not really increasing. We have a lot of buildings. And curiously, we never talk about this, but about 20% of commercial real estate in almost every European city is standing empty. So while we have tremendous amount of real estate standing for speculation, we have a housing crisis. Come on, it's also not realistic, and then we are really building a lot. So anyway, that's about competitiveness. But the other is about still the 47 million people who cannot heat their homes. Again, I think we need to have long-term solutions for them. And that's, yes, compensation is okay, but why don't we just fix their buildings? And I'm afraid, and that's my second provocation, I don't think the ETS will help. In fact, it will, ETS in the housing sector, it will be backwards, because the problem is, any market-based approach here only results in cherry picking. What is the little thing that I can do to make it a bit lower my energy bills? That will actually lock us into high energy use, because systemic retrofits, the deep retrofits, can only be if you take the whole building at the same time and approach it as a system. But that's a lot of money. It will not work on a market basis. We know there are a lot of studies. So there, I think a lot of this compensation money and a lot of the climate funds I would put into actually just fixing the building stock for people. And with that, we would fix so many of our global problems. And finally, just on the point of competitiveness, if you allow but actually you already mentioned, Frank, all what the Commission is doing. So in the end, it's really towards this direction of simply changing the economic structures. For example, 40% of China's economic growth was due to the green industries. So they don't grow a lot, but still all that growth was driven by the new green industries. So I think we can allow be more bold. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those insights. Then Frank and Reena with their thoughts.
Yes, so many interesting things. I fully agree. The Draghi report and also the policies combine, speak about a roadmap for sustainable competitiveness and and decarbonization. So those two go together. Decarbonization remains a competitive strategy, and there's also an international dimension to it. If we can show it here, we build trust, but we also can showcase to the outside world who's also embarking on this transition. China was mentioned, others. Just very briefly, if I was unclear on this social climate fund, social climate plan, member states can use at maximum 37.5% for direct income transfers, but they may choose the measures, and there's guidance on measures. Measures have to include investments in energy efficiency, like those you mentioned, or in low emissions mobility. And any direct income support has to be related to those and coherent to those. Member states don't have to use it. They are free also to use, only to use investment measures, but investment measures are the core of how to help vulnerable households to retrofit their houses and so on. So this is important. The other point on sectors you mentioned, yes, I think the Commission believes that certain sectors are important for security, supply security, and strategic autonomy. And there was a couple of strategic dialogues, so without mentioning, I mentioned they existed, and there are sectoral plans in automotive, metal and steel. There will be one in chemicals, and there one more is planned for circular economy. So this probably shows you what's considered as critical here, and I don't speak about defense, which was related to those. And my last point, you had the question on the pan-European. Does it make sense to have a pan-European approach on this? I think it could be in the interest of several member states, maybe Poland is part of those, to follow such a scheme, because the budget allocation of the fund takes into account effective effort sharing. There's some solidarity built in from which a country like Poland would benefit, I guess.
Thank you. And Reena now.
I just want to pick up on a couple of points that Jakub made and give my own take on them. So I fully agree that words matter and trust and confidence matters. And there was an argument from the audience in the democracy panel saying, look, let's stop splitting groups. Let's be very careful about how we consider societal perceptions, and let's make sure that we hear the concerns of citizens. You can't just wash them away with big level words and then point in a direction. And there's nowhere where this is clearer than in the green transition. When you have programs put in place that don't deliver, when you have a lack of confidence in government to deliver on their commitments, you see that under the Gilets Jaunes movement in France, but you've seen that under many fossil fuel subsidy reforms across the world. The population effectively just resists, and there's backlash. And that will happen more than ever in the green transition and right now, because we see the crisis of trust and confidence in governance that we've seen. I mean, we discussed it in the first session today. So there, I think, and this is where I want to point to the link to the point on efficiency of government, because when government makes commitments and isn't able to follow through, this is where you end up with a reduction in trust. And I just don't see right now in many European governments that the efficiency of government is quite there to manage these 3 or 4 transitions that I'm talking about. Public employment services are, with AI and with technological transitions, they need to move beyond unemployed. You need public-private partnerships to think about how to do reskilling and continuous learning holistically. You see so many countries, Poland is one of them, where very small share of the adult population is engaged in continuous learning. Unless we fix that, we're not going to fix this issue of job quality and green transitions. This is a system-level solution. The amount of money that went to fossil fuel subsidies in European countries in 2022 and 2023, this was a result of the lack of social registries to allow for systematic targeting. From the World Bank perspective, I can tell you we had a number of countries come to us and say, how can we target the vulnerable households during this energy price crisis? And when we look at the systems are not there in order to do the micro-targeting. And that's in contrast in some other countries where we work, in East Asia, for example, where we've built those systems up over 10 years' time. The governments have built those systems. So efficiency of government requires bringing digital solutions into government. And that is going to be fundamental for green transition solutions. So I want to just end on that point. Thanks.
Thank you so much to think about. I believe we got like 5 minutes left, so maybe there's someone in the room who'd like to comment or ask our distinguished panelists a question. I got so many more, but maybe someone in the audience. We've been discussing the lack of dialogue, the lack of trust, so maybe to work on this trust, let's have a dialogue. Yeah, So, anyone? I'd like the comment from a gentleman from the social sciences from the previous panel discussion that we shouldn't divide people. We need to connect people to remove this disconnection between social and energy transition policies. So, is there anyone? Yeah, and the mic is coming. Please present yourself and state what you want.
Hello, my name is Marta Łęczewska. I work for Reform Institute, Polish think tank, and we work on energy transition, including the building sector. And I wanted to maybe respond to the point made on the building renovation and deep renovations. Well, the progress is very slow. It's an immense task and also connected to the ownership structures. So despite that, logically, it sounds very well to throw money at the renovation, focus on the renovation, increase the quality of life and the temperature. It's just impossible to do it at the pace required by the climate targets and reducing emission in the building sector without, also compensating part of the people along the journey. It's because we see that getting the owners on board and deep renovation is extremely costly. They don't have this capital, and finding schemes that can support that is not easy. I'm afraid it's just not technically feasible. That's what we observe here on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you. What do you think, Dana?
Yes, that's a very good point. And this is exactly why I think we know this is one of the best solutions for Europe, for sure, both in climate and energy poverty and energy security and or cost of living crisis, almost anything you say, that's what would help most. And still it's not happening. Why? Because we expect people to pay for it. They won't be able to. Exactly what you're saying. I think we need massive support in this area. And there is so much financing, so much money going just the things that we said. I think if we were more seriously putting some of that money into this direction, I understand it's difficult, but if you go to any complex ownership structure and say, look, here's the money, let's say you have to pay something, but very little, and your house will be fixed or building will be fixed, and you will have much lower energy bills. You will have much better health. I haven't even had time to talk about enormous health benefits. China is now benefiting from our passive house invention, and India. Their passive house and net zero energy building companies are growing tenfold a year. They are not marketing by energy efficiency or climate, they are marketing by health. Because these buildings are much healthier to live in. We know they eat not only, they not only reduce allergies, respiratory diseases, but number of strokes, number of heart disease, of course, pulmonary disease as well, but just the quality of life, when people move in and suddenly they get their allergy is gone, or asthma is decreased substantially, such a major shift in the quality of life. So it's just, I think we would need to put much more money into that. If we compare it to the other climate options, carbon dioxide removals, so none of that pay back. But we expect this pays back, but it's a long payback. Just because it pays back, why do we expect the average pensioner to do this, where we don't expect in the other areas of the pensioners paid for carbon dioxide removal and in other areas? I think we need to just rethink our financing and put much more public finances and public support into this area so that we can once and for all get rid of so many of our fundamental problems. It takes 2 decades, but in 2 decades we are gone from many of our challenges. Thank you.
Thank you for this answer. Guys, anyone wants to reflect on that? Okay, so we are not finishing our discussion. We are going further with our discussion, but with a short break. In the meantime, I'm asking you for a big applause for our wonderful speakers. And I'm leaving the mic for our wonderful conference here.
And the speakers are Wojciech Jakóbik, Chair, Diana Ürge, Vorsatz, Frank Siebern-Thomas, Reena Badiani-Magnusson, and Jakub Sokołowski. Absolutely, applause is due. Ladies and gentlemen, I know that it is not a good idea to eat your lunch fast, but we'll cut the lunch break short. Please be on time. If you intend to leave the building, even for 5 minutes, please leave the headset here. You will find one on your way back. One was lost yesterday. Please look into your bag. Perhaps it's there, you forgot, you did anything. They are very expensive, and the university will have to pay for all the ones that are lost, and they can't be used outside this room, so they're absolutely of no use anywhere else. There will be jars for the questions, and if you missed an opportunity to ask a question to this panel, Alex is holding the jar in their hand. Alex, show everyone what the jar looks like. If you missed an opportunity yesterday or today to ask a question, put it in the jar, and the university has promised that all the answers will be provided. We will tell you in what form they will definitely be provided. Time for lunch, questions later. Thank you very much. Let's be on time. 2:45 p.m. for those of us who are watching us remotely and sorry don't have lunch with us. That is 2:45 p.m. Central Eastern European time, of course, the summertime. And then we go for EU in the age of tech revolutions. Thank you.